Well, it's better that I clean it up and toss it now than for the kids to have to come in when I'm no longer there and Linda's no longer there. They have to clean out a house after parents if they're hoarders. And my older boy, Scott, he is going through that now with his
pretty much almost on a weekly basis is me and my daughter go downtown, get something to eat, and run around, go to some places we have to go to. So yesterday we decided to do all new stuff. So we went to Bistro at the Bijou. It's a little restaurant at the Bijou Theater.
Oh, yeah, those are nice. And it's a nice place, actually.
It feels like a pub on the inside, kind of, and the food was really good. And it had come highly recommended from a friend of mine who he's a trustworthy source. So, and other people also said it was good. So we went there and ate, and we really liked it. And then we had never stopped at the Phoenix Pharmacy. They've got that. They've got that old soda fountain where they just make milkshakes and ice cream and stuff now. So we've been to Cruz Dairy Farms and some other places, and then sometimes we'll have a dessert at the restaurant, but we like to go. So we went to Phoenix Pharmacy and we got some of their ice cream, and it was really good too. So it's just a good day.
My grandfather and two of my uncles were pharmacists at drugstores. When the last uncle died, they tore out the marble around the soda fountain.
Yeah.
And Dad brought it home.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm not sure.
You repurpose it?
I don't know if he did anything with it.
Yeah. Still, it's pretty neat. I love that feature of, I think it's...
new bag.
All right. I can do that.
I guess it's still a pharmacy. They had it looked like a pharmacy counter in the back. And they sell some other items on the shelves, kind of like a pharmacy would. But the first big part of it is just the counter, and then on there. And me and Kelsey both ordered a half of what it was we wanted, and I can't imagine getting a whole one. It would have been a lot. It would have been a
sugar high.
Yes, it would have.
The communion room, you can open that door. There's a sink in there.
We're rigid and flexible.
Okay. All right.
It's in
rigid and flexible.
We were talking about some
just major change.
Essential issues here. Can we put coffee in?
Yeah.
Coffee.
All right.
And he said he's putting
Considering who's teaching Sunday school lesson, you got to have coffee.
Bathroom right next door too.
There's a whole truckload of flooring in the room next door that they're putting in.
Yeah, they're putting in flooring.
Where are we going to be? We're going to be in 105. Which room is that?
It's the long one, right after you get off the elevator.
Where the offices used to be.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
My gosh, that's like 10 times as much room as we need.
The Zoom room is 105. We'll be in room 10. This one we'll be in room 108, down at the far end. Mary Jane's.
Right at the corner.
Okay, we need to fill the
Somebody
room.
thinks
That's
highly of our
the
class
back
because they're doing a lot of work. Of course, those rooms haven't been touched in quite a while.
All I know is like I did the flooring in the communion room, which is that little room.
Yeah.
That carpet is like 97 years old, and I scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed, and I still can't get out all of the wine stain or the grape juice stains.
Yeah. My goodness. Well, that would be hard to do anyway.
So having them put in tile is going to be so much easier to clean.
Yeah, absolutely.
On my part.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled.
We're probably all better off having that carpet out of there anyway. You know. Those may be asbestos tiles underneath, but as long as they're not broken up, then it's fine. You know.
We had the problem with the gymnasium.
Yeah.
Boy, Gary, I didn't realize how old you were, that you knew that the offices were down here.
All right, it's 10 o'clock, so we'll get started. Announcements. Some of these are repeats. It looks like there's a couple of new ones on here. Wednesday nights, they're looking for help for the kids. I'm going to do this new challenge through a study through the book of Mark. So to sign up, just call or text Hannah and let her know. She'll tell you what activities there are available, and you can choose which one you'd like to do and when you would like to do it. The dates are, the dates are on the bulletin as well. But Hannah will have all of that information. So if you're interested in helping out on Wednesday nights, particularly for this new, study challenge for the kids, taking them through the book of Mark, that's what this is for. There's the summer school supply drive that's going on from, started last month. It's going through the 17th of this month. The youth is hosting this. It's just a collection, basically trying to get, school supplies, but also some personal hygiene stuff. They're looking for backpacks, pencil boxes, college ruled paper, ink pens, binders, that sort of thing on the school supply side. And then pretty much anything personal hygiene, and don't forget, feminine hygiene products as well. And then they're also even looking for, like underwear and socks and that sort of thing, deodorant. So plenty of room to give there. Important stuff as well. There's the day trip for the youth will be going to Appalachian Ministries of the Smokies on July the 20th. They're going to meet here at the church at 11 a.m. And they're going to take those supplies. So that trip is to take those supplies that we collect over to the Appalachian Ministries of the Smokies. That's who we're donating to, and they'll be responsible for disseminating it to the people that need it. School bash. There's a youth cookout with games to celebrate to prepare for the new school year on Wednesday, July 27th at 6 p.m. So it says all students 6 through 12 are welcome. So, be here on July 27th at 6 p.m. if you wish to participate in that. Nightlife signups are open. And those are we've talked about those before. They hope to begin they plan to begin on August the 1st. It's a small group, and they need people to host, also people to lead the small group, and they're going to, it's a format has been chosen. They're going to, this small group is going to be going through Jen Hatmaker's Simple and Free, and it says you don't have to have the book to be able to participate. So I don't know what that means. I guess maybe we have some books, or there's an online resource. I'm not really sure.
The book really isn't necessary.
Okay.
The leader will walk them through it.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, I see what they say. You don't have to have a book to.
Right.
I
you
got
don't
you.
have to have the book to participate.
Understood. Okay, so to participate in the small group, the leader will take care of the book info for you. So that's what that means. It's 1 hour, one night a week for about 8 weeks is what they're planning. Starting on August 1st. So if you want to join, the sign-up sheet's going to be in the narthex down in the, down here, or you can talk to Lola in the office. It does say space is limited, so I guess that's all contingent on, how many hosts we have and that sort of thing. So if you're interested, sign up now. The FBC trustees cleanup, that is pretty much already kind of in the, started and is ongoing. I think just yesterday, maybe we got rid of a bunch of stuff that was stacked up down in the fellowship hall, tables and chairs. I believe another church came by and took some of those things. Right. So that's good. But anyway, chairs, folding chairs, old classroom tables. There's a bunch of stuff in the church that it's just not used, and other people may have a use for it. with that said, if there's anything here that you have donated out there that you would want back rather than for it to be given away, please let us know. But as of now, I know that they've just gotten rid of some chairs and some, folding tables and that sort of thing. So that's ongoing, and it is a good thing. The blessing of the backpacks. So that's coming up. That's going to be on the Sunday, part of the Sunday morning service on July 24th. And it's, they have a prayer time during the worship service for students who are going back to school. And it's for students, teachers, bus drivers, all staff and support for the school year, everyone that's involved. So just a special little prayer service there during our July 24th worship service. And then Ice Cream Sunday is back. Mark your calendar for the Ice Cream Sunday on July 24th. The entire church family's invited to attend. They're going to gather in the fellowship hall at 5 p.m. that day for, obviously for some ice cream, but also for some just other kinds of fun and fellowship. So it says bring ice cream. Homemade would be great. I think homemade should have the top priority, but all ice cream. I've never really met much ice cream that I didn't like, so it'll be all right.
I don't know. Some of the Japanese ice creams are strange.
I have had some Japanese ice cream, and they were strange, but I did like it. But I haven't had everything. So I'm sure there may be some ice cream out there. Like
their green ice cream is a little on the weird side.
Like, I don't know, is there such thing as blue cheese ice cream? That doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So there may be something, but until then, I like all the ice cream I've encountered so far. But there'll be games and stuff, and it even says, bring your favorite games or puzzles or whatever you want. I'm sure someone will be excited to engage in whatever it is you like. All right, that's enough. That's all the announcements. So let's. And just to remind everybody, another announcement on July 24th. So that's the day that we just talked about. There's the Ice Cream Sunday. It will be our first day down in room 108 on the first floor for Sunday school, which is where we will be indefinitely, since First Christian is taking over this floor, and we're getting everything ready for that. So just remember that on that Sunday, and we may all get together and do something, move some stuff down or whatever, maybe the week before. I don't know if we have time, but I think Doug and some others who were here throughout the week are probably just going to take care of everything. At least I hope they do.
The 108 is the corner room?
Yes, it's the corner room on the first floor.
That used to be the choir room, and we used to sit like this.
Really?
When we had a choir, it's 5 times bigger than what we've got now.
Yeah. I just know it's the room. It's got the little communion, that Adrian was talking about. It's got a little sink and area in there. But anyway, that's where we'll be. I think it's going to be great. All the Sunday school classes will be moving down to the first floor, obviously, so that First Christian can have this floor and call it home for now. And then,
what's their forecast for how long they're going to be?
I don't know if there is a forecast for how long they're going to be. I think it's, when I was talking to Rory or someone, they suspected a minimum of a year.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of what we're planning for. Obviously that could change based on a myriad of factors, but it'll be cool to have them here, and I know they're very appreciative, and they're working on stuff, and I'm going to help them. Once we get everything out of here, we're going to make sure there's some internet resources up here in the ceiling, and we'll get them access to that so they can use their equipment, but it's going to be a good thing. All right, let's pray. We'll get into the Sunday school lesson. Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for this day, for this opportunity to get together in your name, to talk about you, to think about you, and wrestle with questions and that sort of thing. And we just pray that you would bless our time together, that you would bless our worship services, that our service, our praise, our everything would just be true to you, Lord, that you would accept these things. And we just thank you for being here with us. And we thank you for your Son, for Jesus, and our salvation. And we just pray that you would be with everyone here, that you would be with the folks who, we all have our own struggles and things that we're dealing with, Lord, and we ask that you would just carry us through, guide us and lead us, and just take us out of here safely when we leave today. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so last week we continued our discussion. This is basically going to be the third discussion we'll have about the moral argument, and then we'll move on next week. But last week we looked at some objections to the first premise of the moral argument. If you remember, premise one is if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. And so the objections that we looked at last Sunday, we talked about what's called the Euthyphro dilemma, and then we also looked at the objection from atheistic moral Platonism. And we saw how the Euthyphro dilemma really isn't, it just sets up a false dilemma that the theist only, the theist only needs to offer a third alternative in order to avoid the dilemma, and doesn't need to put much effort into dealing with the two horns of that dilemma, as they're often called. And then atheistic moral Platonism seeks to embrace the objective reality of, the objective existence of moral values, but it does so by trying to establish them as just brute facts of the universe that just exist inexplicably, as necessary features of the universe. So the problem here is that there's just no good reason why anyone should think that moral values, much less moral obligations, just exist without explanation. What does it even mean to think about concepts like justice, for example, and that it just exists on its own? You need persons and relationships in order for those concepts to have meaning. And without those relationships, moral concepts like justice or we talked about, we mentioned loyalty, they just have no meaning. So the idea of them just existing in abstraction is kind of, it's unintelligible. And then we also saw how this view offers no basis for moral duties. Even if you did have these abstract ideas such as justice and loyalty and that sort of thing that existed, they were just there. Even if such things did exist, how does that account for moral obligations? How does the inexplicable existence of an abstract idea such as justice result in a moral obligation for me or for you to behave justly? So that's the question. We also pointed out how moral vices would be just as real on this view. And so what obligation is there for humans to embrace moral values rather than moral vices as the proper way to navigate life? And we brought up the Star Wars analogy. Why become a Jedi rather than become a Sith? If you're familiar with Star Wars, that question is just left unanswered. So typically the atheist who wants to embrace, the existence of these objective moral values will simply root them in human flourishing. Human flourishing is the foundation for moral values and moral obligations. And so whatever contributes to human flourishing is good, whatever detracts from it is bad, and that's just pretty much the end of the story. So the problem here, for many people at least, is that it just doesn't get you to the existence of objective morality. In order for morality to be objective, it can't be influenced by human biases or human opinion. So at best, the purely humanist view just gives us, a morality that's really just rooted in a general agreement among humans. But again, why even think that humans have objective moral value to begin with? What about the nihilist who believes that there really are no such thing as moral values and moral duties, and that they're just an illusion of, that humans follow, that they're non-binding. So if the humanist insists on denying that, they deny theism, if they insist on denying that there is a God, then they would need to show that in the absence of God, that nihilism would not be the proper way to live, that nihilism is not true. And Friedrich Nietzsche, he popularly spoke on nihilism, and he would argue that the absence of God leads immediately to nihilism. He made the case for that. And I think he's right. Without a moral lawgiver that stands above and beyond the human condition, there's just no source for objective morality. And so this is why theism is often, and I think is the strongest position for holding to the existence of objective moral values and duties. Now we're going to move on and we're going to consider objections to premise 2 of the moral argument. So premise 2 of the moral argument is objective moral values and duties do exist. That's the claim. And I think that most people, and it seems to have been, from what I've read, it's been shown through various surveys and that sort of thing, most people agree that objective moral values and moral obligations do exist. However, some people have claimed that the socio-biological account of the origins of morality undermines our moral experience. Remember, the naturalist believes that human morality has been ingrained in us through like socio-biological evolution. So the argument there is that if our intuitions, our moral intuitions, have evolved as part of the evolutionary process, then they really can't be trusted. But is that a good argument? It's not. And the reason it's not a good argument is because the truth of a belief is independent of how you come to hold that belief. This is what an example of, and we've talked about this, I think, in the past, but it's been a while. This is an example of what's called the genetic fallacy. The genetic fallacy judges the truth of something based on its origin or where it came from, how it came to be. For example, the United States is, our form of government is called a representative democracy. I personally believe this is the best form of government. I do. Amen. But someone might argue that the reason that I believe that a representative democracy is the best form of government is just because I was born in the United States, right? They might argue that the reason, or they might argue that if I were born in a different country with a different form of government, that my belief, would be different. That's to commit the genetic fallacy, trying to invalidate the truth of someone's belief just by showing how the person came to hold it. But that doesn't actually show that that belief is false. There's a myriad of things that could have influenced your moral beliefs, but that doesn't mean those beliefs are not true. You could have come to the realization of some moral belief through reading a fortune cookie. And, maybe that's not the best way to apprehend morality, but that doesn't mean that your belief is then false. It's just you came through it, maybe from a less reliable means is how you came to believe it to be true. Yeah, something like that. So just because my moral values have, even on the socio-biological, argument or process, even just because my moral values have evolved or my perception of moral values has evolved over time, this doesn't undermine the truth of my or your moral code. If God exists, then objective moral values and duties do exist regardless of how I come to recognize them. So again, how we come to know something does nothing to undermine its truth. So this objection to premise 2 just commits the genetic fallacy. It's not a good objection. It can be, defeated. But let's say perhaps that the objection from evolution is not meant to undermine the truth of our moral beliefs, but rather it's to, it questions the justification for holding such beliefs. So, for example, if your moral beliefs were based on, a fortune cookie or reading tea leaves or something like that, they might accidentally turn out to be true, but you wouldn't have any justification for believing that they're true. So, so you wouldn't know that they were true. That's what this objection would get at. Similarly, someone might object that if our moral beliefs have been produced by the evolutionary process, then we really can't have any confidence in those, in the truth of those beliefs. And this is, since evolution really just aims merely at survival and not at truth, evolution is not concerned with truth, but just survival, then our moral beliefs are selected merely for their survival value, not because they're necessarily true.
I can see how self-centeredness and survival, it can be a evolutionary product, but I don't see how God's love and generosity and all the other good values that we espouse come about from evolution.
I think what some might say is that it could just be that so there's a difference in saying that, from someone like a naturalist who holds to the evolutionary process would argue that those things are like our moral values, and those things are created. They're invented by the evolutionary process. But you could just as well say that through evolution, we have just gradually discovered moral values and duties, that we've just come to know them, but they're objectively true. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that, because it does seem that we've, even in my lifetime, I have discovered moral values and, over time and that sort of thing. So on the theist view, those moral values and obligations and goodness and right and wrong, all that thing already exists, and we just, gradually discover it, whether that's through the process of evolution or just because we're the way humans, are, and we adapt and learn and that sort of thing. So that would be okay. But since evolution, itself on the naturalist view just aims at the survivability of a species, its ability to adapt and reproduce and overcome adversity and that sort of thing, it's not aimed at truth. And so the argument might be we're not justified in trusting our moral experience because those things were really just designed toward, to navigate us towards survival and not truth. So this objection isn't aimed at the truth of premise 2, but but it's aimed at my justification for believing premise 2 is true, that objective moral values and duties do exist. But the biggest problem with this objection is that it just assumes, first of all, that atheism is true, that moral beliefs and moral, that's values and obligations, that these are merely the product of evolution. And there are plenty of folks out there who make this claim that the process of evolution is responsible for the invention of human morality. But to date, there is no compelling evidence whatsoever that our moral beliefs are actually the product of evolution. It's not something that has been, or I don't think could be proved. In fact, I have a quote here this is from an evolutionary biologist named Jeffrey Schloss. And he says this, he says, "Not only do we currently lack a fully adequate evolutionary account of morality, but the manifold accounts we do have are also disparate and are often represented by prominent exegetes as having resolved issues that are still in dispute." And he goes on to say, "The problem is there is considerable ambiguity in what it even means to provide an evolutionary explanation of morality, and this ambiguity is often unrecognized by those positing different accounts." So basically what Schloss is saying there is that these accounts that are put forward by evolutionary biologists, from the academic, the world of evolutionary psychology, they don't even have a coherent foundation for how evolution can even explain morality. So the proponents of these accounts often contradict one another in the literature and that sort of thing. And I've seen these accounts in popular books just written from evolutionary biologists, and they don't really say how it works or anything like that. They just assume that, because they assume naturalism is true, they just assume that our moral beliefs and stuff have kind of come from that process. Now, Dr. Craig, the one who, I look at his Sunday school for this one, he actually contacted Jeffrey Schloss and asked him to elaborate a bit on the subject. And Dr. Schloss replied, "The evolutionary debunking argument assumes that moral beliefs are in fact adequately explained by natural selection. There is little question that they are not. Dispositions towards certain behaviors, parental care and, reciprocity and that sort of thing.
Self-sacrifice.
Yes. He says, do have fairly compelling evolutionary explanations, but we don't actually have a plausible evolutionary proposal for the moral beliefs associated with these behaviors. I've done a fairly recent review of the literature, and I can't find any coherent account for moral beliefs or even normative intuitions." So he's basically saying that, yeah, evolution does have some ideas about why humans behave in certain ways, but these values and duties and things that come from that behavior, they have no explanation for where they come from. So even though there's numerous proponents of evolutionary psychology out there making these claims, and they're mostly getting away with it. But the fact is, this objection to premise 2 doesn't really have any intellectual force, as far as what this particular biologist is saying, and other folks who have just are widely read on the subject. But again, the whole argument, presupposes the truth of atheism anyway. But if God exists, then even though our moral beliefs may have evolved, we can be confident, that they're still generally reliable. If God exists and he is the foundation of goodness, if goodness is rooted in God's nature and that's just something that exists, as part of God and the necessary being, then we can be confident that God would want us to behave, accordingly, that he would want us to have generally reliable moral beliefs to live by. So you're first going to have to prove the truth of atheism before you can cogently argue for a morality that is aimed merely at survival, which is what you would have to prove in order for this argument to get off the ground. And then finally, it's important to point out that this argument is actually self-defeating. So on atheism, and naturalism, all of our beliefs, not just our moral beliefs, but all of our beliefs are the product of biological evolution and social conditioning. So if naturalism is true, and we can't have any confidence in our moral beliefs due to evolution's aim at survivability rather than truth, it then follows that we would have to be skeptical about all of our beliefs, about knowledge in general, really. But this is self-defeating because we should then be skeptical of the evolutionary account itself, since it too is the product of evolution and social conditioning. So you see how that works? That's what I mean, that it's self-defeating. If the truth of naturalism and the evolutionary process, if that decreases our reliability in our cognitive faculties as it pertains to truth, then naturalism cannot be rationally affirmed itself. If our cognitive faculties have been shaped by the process of biological, psychological evolution or natural selection, which does not aim for truth but merely for survival, then we can't have any confidence in any of our beliefs are true, including the belief in naturalism itself. We would have a low value of confidence for all of our beliefs. So those beliefs could merely just be to the benefit of our survival, even our belief in naturalism, and not actually true. In that case, people who believe in God and that sort of thing, well, that's just good for the survivability of the species. But also people who believe in naturalism, well, that's just for the survival. The truth of the two, which they contradict one another, would be meaningless. So this objection to premise 2 actually undermines itself. But it does seem to me that we have pretty good warrant for, believing that objective moral values and duties do exist. And as I stated previously, most people, including atheists and naturalists and that sort of thing, would agree. You don't need to be a theist, and we said this from the beginning. You don't need to be a theist to believe that premise 2 is true, that objective moral values and duties do exist, and that you should follow them. So unless you have some sort of a defeater for your moral experience, you are justified in believing that premise 2 is true. Just as we are justified in believing that there is a world of physical objects around us on the ground of our sensory experience of the physical world, we're just as justified in believing that in the existence of moral values and duties based on our moral experience. So unless you encounter some sort of overriding defeater of those experiences, something that shows they are unreliable, you're justified in holding them. And that would take a pretty powerful defeater, right, to override and show you that your moral experience, or much less your experience of the physical world, is unreliable. You would have to have something that prove, you would have to be like Neo and wake up in the,
right.
in the
In the
machine,
Matrix,
wake up from the Matrix and kind of see this, something. You would take something like that to override these things. It's going to take an enormously powerful defeater. And so far, such defeaters have never, appeared. So to conclude, there is no account of evolution.
Not to the same person.
What's that?
They don't exist for the sane person.
Yeah,
there are
well,
insane people
well,
that have decided that they have proof.
Yeah. I guess that's true. I mean, you could have people who have that would be proof for a person. But in general, like you say, that's a small margin of people who might have such an experience. But to conclude this, there's basically three kind of points that have been made. Only if atheism is true could it be said that our moral beliefs are shaped by survival rather than truth. Only if atheism is true could that be the case. And additionally, if atheism is true, it could be said that our moral beliefs, only if atheism is true could it be said that our moral beliefs are shaped by survival rather than truth. And then finally, something's talking. And then finally, if atheism is true and this objection is valid, then it also undermines all of our beliefs, since all of them would have been selected by evolution for survivability and not truth, which makes the argument self-defeating. So, I think it's more plausible than not that the moral argument stands as it is, and that it is a good, how strong it is or not is left open. But I think it's, I think the moral argument has some pretty good strength for the existence of a moral lawgiver. And then when you take that, as we said at the very beginning of talking about natural theology, none of these are supposed to be like knockdown arguments that prove the existence of God, but they do have, I do think that most of them are more plausible than not. Their premises are more plausible than not, and all of these arguments are logically valid. No one contests that. So the cumulative case of all of them together, I think, present a pretty good case for the existence of God. But we're not done. Next week we're going to look at what's called the ontological argument. So the ontological argument was formed by this Benedictine monk named Anselm in the 12th or 11th century. And Anselm's argument is based on God as, and we've talked about this before, but this term or this description, it's based on God as the greatest conceivable being, something which nothing greater can be conceived. And so Anselm essentially argues that once you understand that definition of what God is, then you will see that God must exist, else he would not be the greatest conceivable being. Let this marble roll around in your head for this week before we talk about it. A greatest conceivable.
Our heads are hollow.
Well, sometimes I think there's a little room in mine for for things to move around. But Anselm argues that a greatest conceivable being, at a very minimum, must have the property of existing. Otherwise, it wouldn't be automatically the greatest conceivable being exists. And so he's basically saying that if this is God, then God must exist. It's a neat argument. It's not my favorite, but I think it's probably the funnest one to think about. But anyway, think about that over this week, and we'll talk more about it next week. And that'll probably take up a couple of Sundays, and then we'll move on. I can't remember what's after the ontological argument. I know we are one thing that I do want to talk about. I don't know if it's on I'm going to add it maybe after the ontological argument, or I'll try to figure out a best place to put it. But you kind of prompted this, Gary, when you talked about how you thought that the existence of evil. You were talking about the devil and stuff like that, but that the existence of evil makes a good case for the existence of God. And that actually is a case to be made. The problem of evil is often discussed among, scholars, and it does lend value to, as an argument for the existence of God. So we'll definitely talk about the problem of evil as well. But we're getting near the end of our little journey through natural theology, and then we'll move back into the next thing that we'll talk about is the Trinity once we move out of the. So that'll be an easy
Nothing
one.
like a small topic.
That'll be a simple one. But
yeah, right.
We'll do our best to think about that as well, though. But questions or concerns or Joy?
Could you just say again those three? Only if atheism is true.
Yeah. So basically, what we've discussed when it comes to the objections that we talked about today is only if atheism is true could you really, make the argument that our moral beliefs are suspect because they are a product of the evolutionary process, and therefore they're aimed at survivability rather than truth. And then let me get the order right so that I can, that's why I take notes. So then, addition to that, only if atheism is true could it be said that our beliefs are shaped by survival rather than truth. But if atheism is true, and this objection is valid, then it also undermines all of our beliefs, because all of our beliefs would have been selected, by the evolutionary process for survivability rather than truth. That's kind of the three things that's kind of the three things that we discussed when looking at this objection. That we're not justified, that even though even if our moral code is true, we're not justified in believing it's true if they're just the product of the evolutionary process. That was the objection, and so those are the three things we kind of took away from it.
Yeah, but that doesn't seem, I don't know, I have to think about it harder, but that doesn't seem true, right? I mean, it does seem possible that atheism would be false, and nevertheless, at least some of our moral beliefs would be shaped by evolution, right?
Yeah, they could be, shaped by social I think some morals that we hold can be shaped by our culture and stuff like that. But I guess what we're getting at is there does seem to be a general consensus, a shared bed of moral values that also come with moral obligations by everyone in the world. Now that doesn't mean that we might have some different, what we would consider some, that our moral code wouldn't be a little different depending on, maybe where we were in the world or when we were in the world. But I guess we're talking about some of those foundational beliefs, murder is a bad thing, rape is a bad thing, and, that sort of thing. But that doesn't, I wouldn't think that would, I was trying to think of an example. Maybe you would have one. I'm sure that there's some version of, I'm sure that some folks' moral code may, would be distinct between two cultures that, because of, I don't know, religious commitments or maybe just other commitments that they have. But I don't think that would be, I guess I would argue that the underlying moral values are pretty much shared, I think, by most people, and regardless of what they are, that there are objective moral values and duties that we just have, that all of us have as humans.
I guess I'm thrown by just the first part. Only if atheism is true can these other things be true.
Well, it does seem, I think it is correct that only if atheism is true should we even think that our moral values could be, only if atheism is true would you assume that all moral values and, all moral values are just the invention, just the product of evolution and not something greater. That's what we're saying. You would have to assume the truth of atheism, that there is no God, in order to say that moral values have to be the product or the invention of evolutionary biology or evolutionary psychology.
Or something other than God.
Yeah, right. But what's left? If they're going to be, the atheist, but that's just the common naturalist argument, and even humanism. I was on humanism.org or something the other day after we were talking. I mean, that's the prevailing sentiment, is that our morality is part of the evolutionary process. So
yeah, well, so I guess I'm inclined to believe some of that,
Mhm.
right? That a lot of our morality comes from, social agreements.
But do you believe, so that's fine, but do you believe that that's where it stops? There is no higher, does it stop there? That morality is just an agreement, or are we agreeing on and kind of understanding and perceiving something that exists, beyond that? It's okay to say, I think it would be fine to say we're learning it through social conditioning and stuff like that, like we're uncovering it and discovering it. But the question would be, is that right there where that morality originates, or are those moral values that rooted in something more transcendent and beyond the human mind, which is what we're kind of arguing for here? So that's what I would think. That's the way I would see it. I think we do discover it via various ways, but I also think that our moral values and duties are rooted in God and God's good, that goodness that we talked about as part of the nature of God. That's where I would think they would originate, and that we're just kind of uncovering, discovering, applying them, and that sort of thing. Whether it's through evolution, social conditioning, that sort of thing.
Right.
So-
right. Yeah. I mean, I'm not an atheist, so of course
Yeah.
I believe that.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess I agree to that extent.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well.
A comment regarding my interruption there.
Oh, you're good.
No, it is not straightforward.
Oh.
I thought, I want to be sure and turn off my phone before church.
Yeah.
So I turned it off, and much to my surprise, the volume of your voice dropped dramatically.
Uh-huh.
I thought, is this picking up your voice and going through the Bluetooth? That
Oh, okay.
I hear?
Yeah.
Because then the volume came back up, which said no, and it's as though now it's off, but I'm hearing you well, like I was with Bluetooth. So I don't. And then I thought, well,
That is confusing.
I'll turn it back on and see what the volume does.
Yeah.
The gal on the setup again, she announces that she's turning it back on.
I got you. I could tell. I knew it came from your phone, but I didn't. I didn't know what it said. So that's kind of funny. Well, I'm glad you were able to hear.
So right now, I'm not sure whether it's on or off. I'm happy. It's on. So I'm gonna have to let it completely load before I can turn it off.
Gotcha.